I'll go NPR voice. Welcome back to another edition of Politics Unplugged, the podcast edition. I'm Arizona Family political editor Dennis Welch.
Dennis, fake news Welch. Try to tell the truth.
And this is the Politics Unplugged podcast.
Dennis, if you have a problem with substance abuse, I am more than willing to talk to you anytime you need.
Welcome back to another edition of the Politics Unplugged podcast version. This week we've got Paul Bentz back visiting us here, going to break down some of the big news this week. We have to revisit, and we're going to be focusing a lot on a couple of really important primaries that are basically going to determine like who the next Congress people are from that district. Big news, and there's some big news, some big names jumped into the race for Debbie Lesko's seat in that district, Congressional District 8. Covers big parts of the West Valley, Glendale, Peoria, places like that. And, you have to start with the fact that, a name from the past came back in this past week, and, nobody had this on their political bingo card. I'm talking about Trent Franks, the former congressman who left under, I'd say, a bit of a scandal.
Certainly questionable, yeah.
Was offering, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, wasn't he alleged to have offered a woman, a staffer of his, like money to if she allowed him to impregnate her? Is that about right?
Sounds about appropriate. There are several other inappropriate behaviors. I remember at the time Speaker Ryan was saying, why do I have to be the executioner now? Speaker Ryan, when I read that, I said, oh, gosh, how many speakers ago is that? That's been several.
No, and again, you have Trent Franks jumping in. He held that seat for a long time. He seemed to have, like, at the point before all this controversy started breaking out, like he was the kind of guy who could have held that seat for as long as he wanted to.
Right.
He's also a guy with an interesting political past. I mean, I remember when he was going to run for the U.S. Senate, and then, like, literally minutes before he was expected to make that announcement, they had the podium set up. They had the press conference all ready to go, and remember, he backed out of that. So he's got an interesting political past. But you've also got a newbie coming in, like at least when it comes to these federal types of elections. Not a newbie to Arizona politics, but maybe to more mainstream voters. You've got a big name, Ben Toma, who is the current Republican Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives. Now, he says he's jumping into this race. So you've got those two new names added this past week. They go on with, and they're in the mix now with Blake Masters,
right,
who ran for Senate last year. You've got Abe Hamadeh, who failed in his attempt to become the Attorney General last year. And you've got Anthony Kern, who's a current state representative who was in attendance, you should say, at the Capitol riot insurrection, however you want to frame that, in January 6, 2021. People have a lot of questions about what he did. There's no evidence that we know that he went inside the building or participated in anything illegal. I want to be clear about that. But so that's kind of the framework we're working with, and I just want to get your take in a race like this. I mean, what's your overall take? How do you see this playing out?
Well, first of all, what's interesting is we did not get a 10th congressional district with redistricting. We were expected to have a 10th district that was supposed to rearrange the deck chairs, give everybody sort of a pressure release valve and a place to go. That didn't happen in 2022. So it happened because Lesko stepped down. So now you've got this open seat, which is going to attract a lot of Republican attention. And CD8, I think for a lot of folks who've been here a long time, I think we think of Lesko's seat as the West Valley seat. Well, actually, with redistricting, hers is more of the Northwest Valley seat. It's a lot of Peoria. It is a lot of Phoenix and Glendale and stretches northwards. It's a very heavy Republican district. It's about an 11% Republican registration advantage and almost a 17-point participation advantage. This is a red district. Whoever wins this primary is likely to win the general election. You observe two people who jumped in the race this week. Trent Franks last served in 2017. He and the new speaker, he basically stopped serving as the new speaker started to serve. So that's how long he has been out of office. So with a lot of growth in that area, there's not going to be a lot of institutional knowledge or remembering him as their congressman. Now, Ben Toma, on the other hand, has the unique distinction of being one of the very few candidates in this race who actually live in the district.
Yeah, two big points to make about Abe Hamadeh and Blake Masters, who I'm sure has got good name ID because they spent millions spent on them raising their ID in their statewide races last year. Both of them do not live in the district. Masters has lived in Tucson. Hamadeh lives in Scottsdale.
Right. Masters made an announcement with a lot of sweeping, beautiful images of the Tucson desert. And then Hamadeh made fun of him with a Google post with a map showing how far the drive is from Tucson to the CD8. But then his little blue dot was in Scottsdale at the time. So, I mean, like, you've got these two folks. But, you know, Arizona's got a history of not caring as much if people live in the district or not. In fact, it's been sort of loose over the last few years, but really comes down to fundraising and name ID, and I think that's going to be the big decider in this race.
Yeah, and fundraising. I mean, let's focus a little bit on that. We'll get back to Franks a little bit because the interesting thing with Franks is he's been out for the Trump years, so we don't. Where is he on all this stuff? But anyway, let's focus a little bit on the fundraising because it plays into one of my big questions I had. One of the first questions I had for Ben Toma was, was whether he's going to keep his seat in the legislature and keep his spot as Speaker of the House, or was he going to step down and run for Congress and focus all his energies on that. He has told me he doesn't plan on stepping down, that he's going to fulfill his commitment to the voters. I've been around a long time. I've seen plenty of politicians who take this track. Like, I'm going to keep my statewide office or my state office in the legislature, and I'm going to run for Congress. And it never turns out, or seems to hardly ever turn out well.
Well, it's challenging because, first of all, you still have to legislate. You still have to go down to the Capitol and do the job, right? And he has been a very effective Speaker of the House, but he does have a Democratic governor, and he does have a pretty intransigent Democratic group with only a one-vote majority in his legislative body. It's going to be a challenging budget season this next year, especially with the budget shortfall that we're seeing. And so for him to legislate and then also have the time to be able to raise the money, be able to talk to voters and do the things that he needs to be effective in that race is going to be an incredibly huge challenge. On the other hand, though, he does have the built-in advantage because there's lots of local support that he can go out and get. Individuals, there's several West Valley mayors who are largely conservative. You got Weyers, the mayor of Glendale. You've got Beck, the mayor of Peoria. You have Levault, the mayor of Youngtown. All of these other areas that, would like to probably support someone who lives within the district. So he has that built in. He also received Lesko's endorsement. Now, endorsement from the existing congressional person doesn't always mean success, but it would be very helpful. We saw that Lesko was able to use individuals like former Governor Jan Brewer and others in her race to gain an edge. So maybe he can take that strategy and approach while still being in the legislature. But it does come down to raising money.
And that's a big one. I mean, as you bring up the budget, it's going to be a challenging budget. And it's not easy for, to come up with your budget proposal and then to get a majority of people to sign on to that budget. Right. There's a lot of political ramifications for that. I mean, there's almost no way that he could cut a bipartisan deal on a budget this coming year and survive a primary. Right.
I mean, they already, in this last cycle, there was already accusations and there some censures thrown about because of their behavior on things like Proposition 400 extension, which they traded for a rental tax. But the issue is, the governing, I always say, campaigning and governing are two very different things, and he's got to try to do both at once, and that will be very challenging.
Yeah, because what you don't realize, what a lot of lay people don't understand, like when you're the speaker, you're going to be dealing with that big thing, the budget, but you're going to be dealing with everything from the budget all the way down to coming up with parking spots, right? Because you run the house,
right?
So you're dealing with all that instead of making phone calls. And I know politicians or universities, they hate making the calls for the money and begging for the money, but you have to do it. And you mentioned earlier, I mean, you're going to need millions in this.
Right. More than half the candidate's time. I always say that campaigning's the dessert and fundraising's the vegetables. Only a healthy campaign has the actual fundraising to be able to be successful, because you can have the greatest campaign in the world, the greatest messaging, but if you can't get it out in front of people, it's really difficult. I'll use another food analogy. I always say that governing is like baking a cake. It's got to have the right ingredients. It's got to have the right measuring. when you're in campaign mode, all you have to do is tell people that the cake is delicious. You don't actually have to tell them how to bake it. Well, actually, you use this much sugar, this much flour. You just say, hey, I've got a cake and it's delicious. So he's got to try to do both. He's got to bake the cake and then sell the cake at the same time.
So what do the breakdowns of the district tell you? Because this is going to be, again, a primary election that is going to determine this. Primary voters, we all know, don't have to explain this to people, much different type of voter, much more, a lot further to the right. I mean, who would have the edge in something like that? And is there any possibility, if a far-right candidate emerges from this, that it puts that district in play?
Potentially, but the issue is it's a 17-point Republican participation advantage. I mean, this is the real race is in the primary, and unless someone emerges that is just eke together such a small portion of the electorate, and either the Democrats or say an independent candidate came along and offered an alternative. But in a 3-person race, the Republicans basically guaranteed to win. So it would really be that if everybody else that's not a Republican came together, decided they were going to pick one person to be the challenger, maybe they'd have a shot at it. But I think ultimately whoever emerges is likely to be victorious. At this point, you would guess that Hamadeh and Masters are the early front runners in the clubhouse. They have the built-in name ID that you talked about. The question that I have is, are they able to raise money on their own? Hamadeh gave his campaign a big loan and then paid it back after he got the Trump endorsement.
His brother gave him the
Someone in his family did. And then Masters had external support from Peter Thiel and others. And so I expect that we're going to see some very well-funded IE campaigns, some well-funded external efforts to support these candidates. And I don't know how that's going to shake out. That's the big question that I just don't know, because that will certainly help one of these candidates.
And take our listeners, viewers, or whatever, through a race like this. I've always kind of equated congressional races as a lot more akin to a mayoral race. Than like a statewide race. I mean, is this going to be the kind of race where they're going to have to be buying ads on TV, or is this more about more direct, micro targeting, mail, online ads? Like, where's the money going to be spent in something like this?
Well, it's funny you should mention that mayor analogy, because I've often said it's like running for the mayor of 7 different towns at once. Like you have to, each individual community, you need your supporters, you need some of that grassroots support. LD 27 and 28, which are the heart of this district, are 2 of the most active, very aggressive Republican clubs in the state. They have tons of grassroots supporters and people that would be organized and activated, and who they line up for will be very important. So there's a grassroots component to it. There is that local support showing that lent credibility from local individuals like mayors, as I talked about, that I think would be very helpful. And then, ultimately, because of the mentioning game, there will be TV, because people, if you don't get in front of the media and show, oh, I'm a viable candidate, what happens is your fundraising dries up. People need to know that you're a viable, out there being active, and one of the ways to do that is through television and others. We've broken up the television market in such a way that basically Phoenix is one giant TV market. I know this is too nerdy probably for most of our audience, but the Politics Unplugged audience, I know it's very sophisticated.
Very nerdy.
So you can still target folks with, targeted cable ads over the top, in Hulu and whatever else, those ones that give you that way. But really, we're going to see some big broadcast ads on AZ Family and other places, because that's really their only choice here. And so I suspect we'll see people come out early with that. But ultimately, that direct mail that you talked about, organizing local committees, and it's just a slightly different group than I think we're used to. This is a big chunk of Phoenix, and then it's a big chunk of Glendale, and then a significant portion of Peoria. And so that area maybe doesn't get as much attention as we've seen in other big ticket races in the past, but it's going to be front and center in this election. And
how big of an issue is, I mean, you're also, a polling extraordinaire, one of the best here in the state. What's the polling suggested to you, if it's specific to this district or just writ large with the Republican primary voter? How important is election integrity or, those issues with these primary voters? Because you have several candidates in this race that are very deep in some of this election fraud stuff that's, not been proven to be widespread at all.
Right.
But, is this something that's going to be top of mind or near the top of mind of these primary voters?
Well, immigration's going to be number one.
Sure.
We're going to see a lot of border tourists. We're going to see a lot of people with their cowboy hats on.
Build a wall, build a moat, build a, whatever, you know.
We're going to see a lot of these candidates go down and tour the border, no doubt. And immigration will be number one. And then there'll be some other litmus test issues like abortion and other things. But I do think that when it comes to election denial, a majority of the primary electorate among Republicans still believe that there was significant fraud that impacted the outcome of the election. But even if they do that, the challenge is if Trump decides to weigh in on this race, the position on some of these topics, the gradations will be so small that they can't get edgewise on those topics, because Trump's going to he could potentially put his thumb on the scale and give someone a really big lead. I've said this in other crowded races. I think a Republican could put together a very competitive group outside of that, instead of going with the mainstream with everybody else on some of that, on things like election denial, election integrity. They could go out and carve their own path and put together, as Toma has talked about, sort of the governing approach, that he's done vouchers, that he's solved the budget issue, that they've made this major tax refund. But I'm not saying he's going to do that. I think there's an opportunity for somebody to do that in this type of race, because a race to the right can only get you so far, because you're appealing to that portion of it. But the electorate is bigger than that.
In the way I look at it, rightfully or wrongfully, you look at the more extreme candidates being like Dave Homiday's, the Blake Masters, definitely the Anthony Kerns in this race. Is that a benefit for someone like a Ben Toma, again, rightfully, wrongfully, seen as somebody that's more of that traditional business type Republican? That you got these candidates over here fighting it out over the far right, the far right vote or whatever. That creates, as they say, a lane for Toma. I
think so, especially if they target their communications. This district also has Sun City and Sun City West. And so it is it will be the oldest electorate out of the primary. It is a much older electorate, targeting at seniors on some of those senior issues that they care about, Medicare and others. I think they could have great effect. And so it will, I think, broaden beyond just immigration and election fraud. I think the smart campaigns will talk about some of those other issues that seniors care about, because Debbie Lesko has proven that strengthening and growing a base in Sun City has had a really great effect for her, and that her time that she had done that in the legislature prior to running for Congress really gained her some good results. So I think we'll see somebody take that approach.
Yeah, because, again, the primary is such that, you're going to have people obviously go so far to the right, but I'm just wondering if someone like Toma can kind of escape that labeling. I don't remember him off the top of my head right now engaging too much in election denialism.
I don't think so. I mean, and he's an incredibly conservative guy. I think one of the biggest things for conservatives is you can be a conservative without falling off the cliff on election denial. You can be a conservative without desiring to ban early voting. There's a big swath of conservatives.
100%.
Right. But I think you conflate those two sometimes. And so, somebody like Toma or others could take that route and be very effective in this type of environment.
Is this a situation where policy might actually matter? Because Toma is taking credit for the ESA, the Empowerment Scholarship accounts, the school voucher program that allows parents to send their children to private schools with taxpayer money.
Right.
I mean, it's very popular with Republicans. Is that the kind of policy that would work in a primary race where it's usually it seems about just heated rhetoric and how far you can go somewhere?
If he has the money to back that up, I mean, his press release talking about those things, and then Debbie Lesko's endorsement of him touting some of those accomplishments, if they have the money to show the voters those accomplishments, absolutely. Because I think voters do care more about policy than people think. I think rhetorically, if you don't have a lot of money, you have to shout the shortest catchphrase that you have from the rooftops, because you can't get much else out. If you've got a well-funded campaign, you can communicate some of those broader things. That 65 and older audience will read long-form communications. I think, communicating with these audiences with more than just a few words about each topic, I think could be very effective for a candidate like Toma, because they'll read it. They'll sit down and read a policy position. They'll read a full, description of accomplishments. Now, the question is, does somebody take the time to put that out in front of the electorate?
Yeah, and frankly, I don't know if ESA moves Sun City voters, or not. I mean, you'd be a better judge of that, but I'm not sure like that kind of stuff would move them. But I do want to, getting close here to the, our timeline here. So I think I'll save the Democrat primary for another day.
That sounds good.
We'll jump into that some other day. But I do want to talk real quick about Trent Franks. How big of a surprise was it to hear his name resurface? And what do we know about his policy positions anymore?
I was surprised. I didn't even know he lived in the West Valley anymore, quite frankly. I didn't know he even lived in the area. He sort of disappeared off the map after sort of the investigation, after the allegation, after the resignation, and hasn't been seen. I don't know. In checking in with folks, haven't heard a lot of active in any of the local politics, showing up at precinct committee meetings or any of those events. Some of these folks have been very, very active. I mean, Debbie Lesko, all the way through, has been very active, appearing at these events and talking to folks. So I don't know if he's got that built in what he used to do. I think that, like maybe somebody like Arpaio or others that had that height of popularity, they think they still have that. Mm-hmm. And so, this is his general area and he's going to jump back in. I don't know how much of a factor he's going to be.
Well, I mean, that was the thing, people with long memories may remember that Trent Franks was a nobody in a very crowded primary when he first won re-election, emerged out of, I think there were 5-6 candidates or something, emerged as the victor. It's starting to look like it could be that again.
It could be, but if he does that, he's got money. He's very well funded. He needs to hire a good digital team, because if you Google Trent Franks right now, the Google results for the first couple of pages aren't particularly good. So to get past that, for people to remind that he's been out of office for years, he's going to need a good digital team to help that through. But he has had well-funded campaigns. He generally personally funds them himself. He's the one that puts the little babies with sunglasses on his sign. So I suspect we'll see the reemergence of the babies, and who knows where we'll go from there.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up right there, man. And good to see you wore your Diamondbacks hat. Show some pride.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I know you're a big sports fan, so I do want to end this portion by saying, hey, congratulations to the D-backs this year. It was a hell of a season, hell of a playoff run, and now we can all focus on. I think it's your favorite sport and favorite team, the Phoenix Suns.
There we go.
They're back to the top of the priority list. And with that, I'm going to end it on one sports question for you. Phoenix always known for great point guards. So who do you start, bench, and cut from Kevin Johnson, Steve Nash, and Chris Paul?
Wow. So I'm gonna go ahead and start Steve Nash. I'm gonna bench Kevin Johnson, because when I was a kid, Kevin Johnson was the one my dad took me down to the court and said, son, I need you to see. That's KJ right there. See how tall he is. I know he looks like a little guy on TV, but he's tall. And I was starstruck when I met Kevin Johnson many years later. And then I unfortunately, I'd have to cut Chris Paul, because I just think his time in Phoenix wasn't long enough to really hold on for that.
All right, man. Thanks a lot. Thanks for stopping by here, Paul. And until the next time. Welcome back, and here with producer extraordinaire Colin.
Yeah.
How are you? How you feeling, man? I haven't been around much.
I'm good.
Week.
You have not. Things have been good. We should point out that you are actually on vacation and decided you're dedicated enough to come in, which explains the hat and hoodie.
Yeah.
But actually came in on your week off because you didn't want to miss the pod.
Nope.
And you probably will miss the pod next week. We don't anticipate a podcast next week because this room we're in is being redone. So it's out of commission for a week.
Yeah, I believe we're getting the wet bar.
The wet bar, yes. Yeah, the go-go cage. Yeah, we'll be on
the sauna, I think, will be over there.
Yes. Yeah. This room has actually worked very well, but there are some technical ways it can be improved. So next time you see us and hear us, it should be from a improved podcast studio.
Yeah, man. And, for everybody who's watching this on YouTube or whatever, you're really lucky that I shaved. It would not have been a pleasant sight. I had my vacation beard going, there's a lot more gray hair in it now. It wasn't a good look for me, Colin. I'm going to be honest with you. It just was not looking good.
Yeah. Now, I drive myself insane every time I grow a mustache or beard, and I'm constantly playing with it, and I can't do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Do you ever do that too? I don't want to get in too far off topic. We got to get into when you try to grow the beard out a little bit larger, and then you just shave everything except the mustache just to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
And it's always disturbing.
It's not great.
No, it's not. Good.
Great.
It's not good at all. And I think most guys who shave and don't have beards and do that, like they've tried that and probably the same results. It's just very few can pull off the stash.
No, you learn in a hurry. You're not Tom Selleck.
Oh God, that's a topic for a different day. Like best mustaches, maybe for Cinco de Mustache next year. Like best mustache.
We're in the middle of Movember, so I guess this would have been the time to do that.
Movember.
It's like awareness for something men grow out mustaches. I don't know if
mow their lawns.
Yeah. No, it's a thing. It's a thing.
Regardless, it's been a great week off. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't plan anything. So, except for this. So that's been great. The only thing, the big downside is that the Diamondbacks did not, come through victoriously.
No. It's funny how quickly it goes from, it's so cool that they're there. It's just such a great story that they're there.
But then you want it so bad.
Yes, and then you lose. It's like, that's it?
Yeah.
I mean, in big picture, amazing season for them. No one expected this. Great story. Happy for them. It's just hard to have it end.
Yeah, I know, and there's a lot of positive vibes I want to carry forward, and I don't want to be as a negative guy. Like, look, I grew up in Iowa, an Iowa Hawkeye fan. It was being a fan for an Iowa Hawkeyes was always not like if the other shoe is going to drop. It's like when is it going to? When's it going to happen?
Yeah.
But these things are so rare. We saw this with the Suns a few years ago. They're in the NBA Finals. It is hard to get back to those things.
Yes.
And once you're there, you really do want that for the team. You want that for the community. This community was really ready to embrace that. They really had connected with this team. Baseball, I think, it just wasn't connecting for a number of years in Arizona here and in Phoenix. For a number of reasons, and I think the number one reason is for a long time this has not been a very competitive team, and then here we are, we're like, holy cow, we're in the World Series?
Right. It felt like a 20-year rebuild after the last title.
Yeah.
And they seemed like they were legitimately on the way up this year. Mm-hmm. No one thought they would hit this.
Yeah.
No one thought World Series, but people had expectations that this would be a good team. This is a good young team. They do have a really good young core. Mm-hmm. So things should be improving, but
they need another bat and another pitcher too. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I don't think it's baseball. It doesn't take rocket science to see that. When you're throwing bullpen games in the World Series, I mean that's
tough. Yeah,
that's something, right? Yeah. Also want to since I was talking with Paul a little bit too. I said now the focus kind of shifts over to the NBA, kind of your area of expertise. You are a big NBA fan.
Yes, I am,
and I just like to get your thoughts on the Phoenix Suns. I mean, let me start first. And maybe I'm a little bit too early on this. And maybe I got to see more, maybe 20, 10 more games, 20 games or whatever. I think there's a lot of questions about this Suns team chemistry-wise. Yeah. A whole bunch.
There are a lot. With the giant caveat that we haven't seen Brad Beal yet.
Yeah.
And haven't gotten all that much out of Booker. He's played, I think, 2 games.
Yeah. Which in itself is a concern. It's a
concern.
Thing. It's a thing.
It's a concern. I mean, great sign that he came back last night and was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. He started slow and by the end was, a one-man show for the Suns.
Last night we taped on Friday, so Thursday against the Suns. The second time they lost to the Spurs in 1 week, and Wembanyama really, that kid is a freak, man.
I was at the game last night.
Yeah.
And Wembanyama lives up to every single bit of the hype.
Yeah.
He's amazing. I have never seen a guy who will change the game the way he will. We talk about players changing the game, and what we mean is they're going to be really good.
Yeah.
No, he completely changes the way you have to play him. That's one of the reasons why I'm a little less – I could be more panicked about the Suns than I am because they just – 2 of their games so far against a team where I don't know what you do against them. Mm-hmm. someone may figure something out, but I don't know what you do against a guy with an 8-foot wingspan who can shoot from outside.
Yeah.
And, it completely alters your offense if you can't shoot when he's within 10 feet of you. And
it's crazy.
That's the problem.
I saw him jump out during the game. I was watching from TV. I saw him jump out at a 3-point shooter.
Yes.
And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, that's just freakishly. I mean, the only question for him is health, which is a question for any athlete out there. And being 7'4",
7'4", allegedly, yes.
Yeah, and very thin.
Very thin.
I mean, injuries could hamper him. We'll have to wait and see.
Yes,
But that's the
you never know. The big concern with guys that size always seems to be their feet. And I think one thing that will probably help him is he's a lot thinner than a lot of the really big guys we've seen, like Yao Ming. Or like Bill Walton was sort of the original big guy with bad feet.
Yeah.
He isn't carrying nearly the weight they are, and is really athletic.
Mm-hmm.
And my guess is they don't try to have him bulk up like some other players who are that thin.
Yeah.
They might push them simply to lower the strain.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I was really just stunned watching him play a couple of games. And when he improves on something like his jump shot is really good.
Yeah.
But it's going to get better.
It's going to get better. He's 19. He's 19.
Yes, it's going to get better. I thought he's going to improve on that a whole bunch.
Yes.
I was blown away by that. But I think the Suns fan too. I'm looking at this though early on. I'm like, man, there's a lot of questions right now with the chemistry, and the fact that the new coach Vogel is supposed to be this defensive guy. And Thursday night against the Spurs, he gave up, 75 points at half?
Yeah.
130 points in the entire game.
It was rough.
Where's the defense, man?
And Wembanyama had 38.
Yeah.
Again, I'll cut them a little slack on playing San Antonio because I think you're going to find a lot of teams playing San Antonio and having absolutely no clue how to defend them.
No.
And they keep, a lot of Wembanyama's points were on just lobs into him at the post, and he turns and lays it in. And what you can't see on TV, I suspect, that you can see in person is those lobs could be anywhere, man. Some of them, I thought they were just chucking it into the crowd, and his wingspan is so big. No, he catches it.
Well, and the way he dunks the ball too. His torso is 20 feet from the rim, and just boom.
Yes.
It's just weird, man.
Early on, people were saying, he's thin, so they'll just muscle him out.
No.
You can't. And, I mean, even if you do it, you're not muscling out of his range. You can muscle him out from under the basket. He'll still dunk on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's nuts. So on the Suns, they haven't had Beal. Let me go glass half full here.
Okay.
They haven't had Beal.
Please.
So we don't know.
I need a half a glass of full beer here. Positive vibes, man.
Yeah. We don't know what they look like with Beal. We have not seen it at all. Booker's still going to be a little rusty. I mean, he looked phenomenal in Game 2 against the Suns once he got.
And Durant has looked amazing.
Durant is Durant. He looks great. If there's any comp body-wise for Wembanyama, it's Durant, except that he's 5 inches taller, which is insane. It's just insane. The bench, which was going to be a giant concern. And they upgraded it with the trade where they brought in Nurkic and Grayson Allen. Looks okay. Grayson Allen can. I never thought I would be the guy rooting for Grayson Allen. Grayson Allen looked really good. Wow. I know.
Wow. You are rooting for Grayson Allen.
It's so hard. It's so hard. But looked really good. Legitimately, he is a solid addition to the team.
Eric Clapton of basketball players.
Yeah. Yeah. Except that you could argue Grayson Allen is underrated.
Oh boy! For those unfamiliar with that reference, go back to last week's podcast and listen to us talk about the top 300 guitar players.
Whatever it is.
Whatever that list was.
Top guitars. So anyway, you got so many new guys on the Suns. They need time to gel. They haven't played together much. They fell behind by 27 to the Spurs. They made it up and tied it up before losing.
They also blew a 25 point lead.
Did.
And it's just I think it's chemistry. The one thing that concerns on the offensive side, the thing that concerns me, this guy was supposed to be this defensive Svengali. Like, where is it?
And
man?
we're not seeing it.
We're not seeing it. So
And
like,
let's hope we see it against teams that don't have a 19-year-old guy who's 7'4" and looks all world. If they
someday that will be the norm in the NBA.
If they keep blowing leads like that and struggling against teams that don't have an alien playing for them, then I'll be more concerned.
So, and finally, let's move on then. God, the Arizona Cardinals. God, what a week, man! If that organization again, ESPN comes out with another story.
Yeah.
On
echoing a lot of the stuff that was in the Athletic,
just
making Michael Bidwell not look great.
Michael Bidwell's. It makes it look like there's no way in hell you want to work for the team.
Yes.
And there is some gender. Is this the kind of thing that could lead to something like a Snyder type, like Snyder, the old owner,
Daniel Snyder from Washington,
the Commanders,
yes,
formerly known as the football team or whatever,
the Washington Football Club,
which was a better name than the Commanders.
It was, yes, they should have stuck with Washington Football Team.
Yeah, the Washington FC. So the Commanders. My a good buddy of mine just shortens it all up and just refers to them as the Manders.
Sure.
Horrible nickname.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a horrible nickname.
Does it hit the point of Daniel Snyder? They had so much on Daniel Snyder by the time he finally went.
That's good perspective.
Yeah. If being a horse's ass was enough to get you booted out of the NFL fraternity,
oh boy,
we would have seen a lot more than Snyder right now. I mean,
true.
The Ursays in Indianapolis.
True. The Davises, maybe.
The Davises,
the Raiders.
Yes.
I'm just assuming now.
In Oakland and Los Angeles and Vegas and almost Irwindale.
Nation, dude. Raider Nation. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of there was one other who got run. Was it Jerry Richardson? One of the women in his office referred to him as Mista, and he and give him foot massages, as I recall.
Yeah, I know.
Allegedly, I should probably double check that, but I believe that was.
It is concerning though, because like there are some lawsuits out there from former coaches alleging, I believe there's some racial allegations involved in those.
Yes.
But the thing with the Athletic piece and the ESPN piece had out there is, some real, gender issues between men and women, which I think is significant.
Yes.
And, and it doesn't feel like, like Bidwell is coming out there saying this is all BS. He's not taking the Sarver approach.
No.
No,
he hasn't said much. And I think most of it has been more of we're all learning. We're all trying to grow. Yeah.
Okay. I'll shut up before I get all of us in trouble.
Well, and then you can just focus on the football end of it.
Yeah.
Where they just traded their starting quarterback.
Let's talk about that, Matt.
So they can play the guy that they wouldn't let off the bench until now.
We're going to Toontown this weekend?
We're
maybe?
Going to Toontown.
Maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know. What's up with that?
No, I believe they just named him the starter.
Oh, good Lord. And Kyler Murray, their franchise quarterback, the man they're paying, $200 million.
Yeah.
Is going to be pads on the sidelines, right?
Yes. Yes. And they say is physically fine now. But they're just not playing him yet.
Wow.
I mean, I suspected going into this year
not tanking, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I suspected at the start of the year they were tanking to try and get Caleb Williams from USC. And then they look like they may not be terrible.
No.
And they beat Dallas. No, they're terrible, and they look like they're tanking.
Yeah, well, but I think the best case scenario for them is that Kyler comes back and is their franchise guy. Because, I mean, any rebuild, any team goes into a rebuild, and that's what this is, right? The hope is to find the quarterback, the next savior. Yeah. That's why everybody is champing at the bit to get the high pick this year, because it's the quarterback. It's the most important position in the league. It's probably the most important position in all of sports.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
It's also the most difficult position in all of sports.
Yes.
So if Kyler was to come back, and play at the level you would expect him to play at, problem solved there. You can use those picks to put people around him.
Yeah.
And you're biting your tongue there.
I just don't see it. I mean, how long's he been in the league now? And they haven't been particularly sold on him to this point. I mean, the fact that they're tanking.
The fact that he was Rookie of the Year. The fact that he was two Pro Bowls. He was an MVP candidate for a couple of years, and for the exception of last year, his numbers all improved. And he was working under a dysfunctional coach and administration, and still was able to produce. I don't know. I see that you and I have a disagreement on Kyler Murray.
I mean, phenomenal athlete. He's also really small to be a quarterback. Mm-hmm. I think the previous administration did a very, very poor job of creating an offense where a guy his size could thrive. Yeah. There were certain things they seemed to run an offense for a 6'4" quarterback when they had a
wasn't it like what? And I'm not
5'11"?
Again, I'm a political guy. I'm not a sports guy, and that's why we got to go kidnap McClune for these types of discussions. But didn't I think the last year the Cardinals were nearly last in the league for designed rollouts for the quarterback?
Yeah, I believe they're 28th.
Seriously, man.
Which I'm not a football coach, but that seems like a
what the hell,
would seem
dude?
Like that would be a good approach for a guy who's good on his feet and not very tall.
Yeah, what the hell, man?
Yeah,
and that's why they've. I don't want to get into too much of it. It just seemed like the league figured it out how to defend against him, and then the coach didn't put him in positions to succeed. Yeah. And when he's put in positions to succeed, I mean, the kid Kyler Murray, I think, is phenomenal. I've been a fan of the Cardinals for as long as I've lived here. It's a long time. And there was never a player that I was excited to see week in, week out.
Yeah.
Because,
he's an exciting guy.
And in a couple of years ago when they were going through their winning streak, I mean, there was a time that you felt like nothing was out of reach, 3rd and 20. Kyler might be able to get this.
Yeah.
And you
didn't feel that way with Josh Rosen?
Not as much to that degree. Not to that degree.
Oh. No.
Not since Neil Lomax.
I will say that they're gonna have a high pick. They've got one win, and they seem to be very, very, very patient in bringing Kyler along as they keep
absurd.
As they shift to Clayton Tune, who might do fine, but there is no history to suggest that's likely. So they're going to have a very high pick, and the quarterback crop in this draft is going to be tremendous.
Yeah. Well, and also too, old school Cardinal fans, I think, can appreciate this because it's a Bidwell mentality. There's also money at stake here. I also feel like part of the decision may be coming from the top to save his return for their next home game.
Certainly wouldn't surprise me.
So you get a few extra tickets.
Yeah, although it's the NFL, they're going to sell out regardless.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, anyway, man, you want to just end it right there? Or?
Yeah. Let's wrap it up. Reminder that we're probably not going to have a podcast next week because of the rebuild of our fabulous studio here. So we'll probably skip a week and then be back.
And then
it's done early. Yeah. Maybe we'll be here.
And maybe we'll be here again with the wet bar.
Yeah, the wet bar.
The sauna.
Yeah. The dance cage. Yeah.
The dance cage. I like it. I love it. I love it. I'm really looking forward to that. So.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot for tuning in or checking us out or downloading us again this week. And with that, we'll
see you in a couple weeks.
See you in a couple weeks. Thanks for listening. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, the Google Store, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. See you next time.